Okay, welcome to our Thursday Q&A. My name is William DeMille, and this is week 70, October 12th, and we are going to be talking about some fun things tonight, and then we will answer your gardening questions. So if you ever have gardening questions, you can text me, email me during the week, and we can prepare answers for you, or you can just get on this every Thursday night and bring your questions, and we will talk about it right here. So this is where we talk about homesteading, the Georgic tradition, farming, gardening, ranching, how to create the most functioning soils in the world. We talk about permaculture, biodynamics, holistic management, and all of that stuff. Oh, sometimes we even get into politics, but I'd like to avoid that if at all possible. But if you have a question, I will answer it. All right, so on this slide here, these are the things that I do, and I like to show this slide every week. So these are the 9 ways that I help people grow fantastic food. I have a YouTube channel. This tonight is our weekly Q&A. That's what this is. And then I have a Patreon channel where you can see fun videos about me and my garden doing things. I'm a soil laboratory, so I can do soil tests for you. I run a school that is 4 months long, 17 weeks long, to help people learn how to build a career in agriculture of some kind. I have 3-day boot camps that I teach. The next one is coming up in January, and you can go to my website to find all this information. I'm available for consulting if you want to build a farm to grow food for your family, or if you're a larger producer, I consult on larger ranches and farms also. My book is done. It's ready to order on Amazon. And if you get on my website on the bottom of this page here, www.georgicrevolution.com, then you can enter your email there and you will receive my newsletter. I don't think I've even sent a newsletter out for probably 4 or 5 months because I try not to bombard people. But we are going to start sending my newsletter out more regularly because my friends and family and people I consult with and former students tell me that they want my newsletter more often. So I'm going to start doing that. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about utilizing cover crops in a home gardening context a little bit. So we're just going to spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes on this. So here's the deal. I had this slide on here probably 6 or 8 weeks ago, and we looked at this a little bit. So the reason farmers use cover crops is to build topsoil. If you have a functioning topsoil, you will absolutely be able to grow crops with no fertilizer, no pesticide, no herbicide, none of the things that can contaminate the ground, and none of the things that are super expensive that make it hard for producers to grow food. Okay? The problem is most of our ground today, most people's gardens and most farm ground and most ranch ground does not have functioning soils. So in Mother Nature, we find the most unproductive soils. Think of the Sahara Desert. We also have the most functioning soils in Mother Nature. Think of the redwoods. Nobody's in the redwoods scattering fertilizer, but in the redwoods, we have soils that are the most functioning. And I sound like a broken record because I say this all the time, but it's such a beautiful analogy. So how can we learn from the redwood soil how to grow the greatest soil, the greatest crops in our own garden? That's what we want to do. We want to mimic nature. So this is all about biomimicry. We're mimicking Mother Nature in the most incredible soils on earth to just be able to grow the best foods. And when we grow food in a functioning soil, it tastes fantastic. You get the best flavors. It exceeds its genetic capacity. I mean, it really can't do that, but things grow better and they think, man, I've never seen a tomato that was so great. That's because we've been growing tomatoes in non-functioning soils and we had to supplement them with fertilizers or something else. And so they really didn't grow as big as they normally would. So in a great functioning soil, we grow big crops, beautiful crops, crops that are resistant to pests and disease, and that's what we all want. So the key is fix your soil problems, and then we will create the very best foods. And that's just the way it is. If you want to grow the best food, have the best soil. And so we go to the soil, or I mean, we go to the catalogs, the seed catalogs. We pick all these fantastic varieties. We're so excited about it. We plant them and then they don't do very good. What we need to do is fix our soils first, and then we can plant the things we want and they will thrive. Okay, so I have this picture up here that says members of common vegetable families. Here's what farmers do to build soils. They will take a multi-species cover crop. So they may have 20 or 30 different seeds in a cover crop mix, and they will plant it out there after they have harvested their crops. So in most of North America, we harvest small grains like wheat or oats or barley. We would harvest those in the summertime, you know, let's just say July. Depending on where you are, it changes a little bit, but pretty much July. And then you have August and September and much of October in a lot of North America where you can still be growing stuff. So as soon as that crop comes out of the ground, you have all those months still left in growing season. That's when you would go in and plant your cover crop. So you would have all these fantastic plants growing, and the purpose of them growing is to feed and build your soil. And that's why you grow the cover crop. Well, let's talk about corn, because we harvest corn in maybe September or October. So what do you do then? You still plant the cover crop, but you would plant the corn with specialized equipment that would plant in that corn crop before the corn is ready to harvest. So they have machines that are really tall and they can drive through the cornfield. And you plant that corn when the corn is tasseling out. So we're saying like in August, you would plant the multi-species cover crop in the corn. So when you harvest the corn in October, you're driving on, you know, 12, 14-inch tall cover crop to plant the corn. It doesn't hurt the cover crop, but it is feeding the soil. So those are different ways that farmers do it. But in a gardening situation, it's very different. In the gardening, it can be hard to, you know, to fit that in, because for a farmer, they are trying to plant their crops so that they can harvest them. That makes sense. They have to have a monocrop to harvest. But in a gardening situation, we don't have to do that because it's a little garden in our backyard, so we can just mix all the seeds up and we can grow it like a jungle. No, that's not completely true for every species, but the idea is really great. So let's just look at this real quick. But here's a key. You want to have 4 plant families. Whether you're listening to this live or on the recording later, write this down. You want to have a minimum of 4 plant families that are growing in the same area, the same piece of land, so that those roots are touching each other. You want the roots touching, so you want your plants to be pretty close together. So if you're going to plant cucumbers and melons and pumpkins and squashes, that's all one family. So you wouldn't want to mix those together in the same place. If you're going to plant your cucumbers, we'll plant that with some other things. Maybe put kale near those cucumbers. And then you could maybe put celery near the cucumbers and kale. And so that's 3 plant families. Well, we need a 4th one. So let's put, maybe you could have garlic that's in there. So there's different things you can plant together, mix it up. So this chart right here, you can just take a picture of this on your phone or whatever, or if you're watching this on YouTube, here it is. But this just came from the internet. You just go to Google, do a Google search, and just type in there, chart on different plant families, and then go to images on your Google search, and there will be 50 charts like this that show up. And so you don't have to memorize all this stuff like a botany class. It's super simple. You just Google it, and then you can start to mix and match things that make sense for your garden. But that's what you want to do to get the the most healthy plants you can possibly get. So let me just pop to the next slide here real quick. So here's a picture. This is, we're doing this idea right here. So look at the wooden fence there in the background. On the other side of that wooden fence of this picture, what you're seeing is a crop that we planted in the fall. It overwintered, and now this is late May, early June. And that crop back there is cereal rye. It's about 3.5 feet tall right now, and it's heading out, and it gets about over 4 feet tall once it's done growing. So there's cereal rye and hairy vetch in that mix. When we planted it, it also had daikon radishes and a few other things in there. So we probably had about 5 things growing out there. But the daikon radishes die in the winter, and that feeds the soil. And then I just took normally you would take a roll of crimper and crimp that down, but it was such a small patch back there that I just took a lawnmower and I just mowed it down. And then we planted vegetables in there. So here in the foreground, you can see, this is Jessica here, who's one of my students last year. She is spreading out wood chips on top of this garden. The rows there are garlic that were planted in the fall, and they're coming up, and you can see that they are about 3 feet apart. And then between those garlic, we will plant other things. And this helps to mix up the plant families so that it turns on the secondary metabolites in the plants. And that just means that it turns on genetics that gives you really fantastic, help in the plant. So you have disease resistance, pest resistance. There's a lot of the gardening books that talk about companion planting. Well, this takes it to the next level of understanding the real science of what's actually happening in the plants on a genetic level and on a physiological level. So that's why we use fancy words like secondary metabolites and all that stuff. So I'm going to pop to the next one here. So here's our next picture. So this picture on here, this is a multi-species cover crop. But all of this is edible. So these are the types of things that you would eat just in a garden. So you just mix it all together, which is very chaotic. It's very crazy. We're growing this like a jungle. And so for traditional gardeners, this really makes our eyes twitch because it's a very new way of gardening. But I've done it this way for several years now. And the last 2 years, it's been fun to have patches like this where everything is just mixed up. You go out there and you watch it grow, and it's kind of a treasure hunt to find things. But what it's doing for the soil, there's about 8 plant families in this mix and about 30 species and probably 60 varieties. So you can see the squash seeds in here. So there's like 8 or 9 different kinds of squashes and pumpkins. But the seeds all look very similar. And so if we wanted to be organized on how we plant stuff, don't do it this way. But if you want to build soil that is super resilient to drought, pests, disease, and you're creating fantastic flavors, and you aren't going to have to purchase fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and all these benefits, this is the way you want to do it. No, that doesn't mean that you can't put a favorite tomato variety in a certain place. Of course, do that. If you have certain carrots that you think are fantastic, or a certain squash or a melon, and you have your favorite varieties, for sure, do that. Don't mix them in this mix. Go ahead and start those plants, put them out as a transplant so that you can take good care of those specific plants. But if you have a large area, like, a 1/4 of an acre garden or even a 5-acre garden, this is a fun way to do bigger areas. Just mix up all the veggies together and just plant the whole thing. So in the big fields of farming, we grow things that are not edible in order to have cover crops. But in gardening context, it's really exciting and fun to just grow everything that is edible. So that's pretty much my message for tonight. So we're going to open this up for questions and answers. I have a couple of pictures here that I can just show you really quickly. So this is the inside of my greenhouse. This is a major part of my classroom here. When my students come, we're in here a lot, like almost every day. And we do a lot of things, but you can see how this is kind of a jungle in here. So this picture was taken March 20th, 2023. So it was this year. And there's just a lot of wild things growing in here. So this stone wall that you're seeing here, it's 10 feet tall. This greenhouse is 130 feet long, and the greenhouse is 30 feet wide, just to give you a little bit of perspective. So I'm just going to go to the next picture here. There's a picture of the 10-foot tall stone wall, and you can see, so if you watch my cursor here, my pointer, we've got the strawberries here and there, and then up here. So there's strawberries all over this wall. There's a lot of medicinal herbs in here. We have Claytonia growing here. There's a fig tree. You can't see the trunk of it, but this branch right here, because it's just out of the picture. So that's a fig tree that's growing out of the ground. And then we have so you can see some plants in here that look like weeds. We let a lot of these grow, and we pick them when they get big before they go to seed. So we try not to let them go to seed. Sometimes we're busy and a few get away from us and do go to seed, but we don't really want the weed seeds to spread. But if we see a big plant growing, a lot of times we'll let it grow. Like this cheeseweed here. We cut this, we put it in the compost pile, we feed it to chickens, we feed it to the milk cow. There's different things we can do with it that are good, and it's a good medicinal herb. And we have medicinal herb people around here who make products out of these things. Like this cheeseweed, it's super good for, I don't even know what it is because I'm not the medicine person, but I think they use this for people who have joint problems and stuff. And then of course this is comfrey right here. I'm going to go to the next picture. So here's another portion of the same rock wall. We have onion chives. This is a pomegranate tree right here, and it's just starting to grow leaves to break dormancy, because it was earlier in the year when this picture was taken. And this big broadleaf here that looks like a thistle, that's actually an artichoke that we're growing for food. And yeah, so this one here, this one's fun. You can see the curly dock here. That's a medicinal herb. Most gardeners just think of it as a weed, and it is. It's pretty weedy, but the herbalists love it. And then we have perennial Welch onions that are growing here. This leaf here at the bottom left is another artichoke. And then this is another fig tree. I have 3 fig trees in here. And then another picture here. Here's the comfrey later on. This is weeks later. But this is the same comfrey plant you saw earlier, but now it's starting to go to seed. And you can see in this picture, beets are growing here. So I think these beets were actually in the earlier picture, but now they're bigger and they're starting to go to seed. We do raise a lot of seed in our operation here. And that was the last one. I'm going to stop my screen share. So we can open this up for Q&A. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them now. And they can be questions about anything. If I don't know the answer, I'm an honest person. I will say, I don't know.
Question about the perennial onions. Are those similar to Egyptian walking onions?
Yes, very similar. They are a different variety, though. They don't produce the onion up on top like the Egyptian walkings. I do have some of those in that greenhouse. These ones, you just cut them off at the base. So you have a clump of them growing there, and I will cut off maybe half of it, and you take them in and you just use them like a green onion. But they just keep growing. They've been in there since I built the greenhouse. Wow. So they just keep growing forever.
Do they also multiply? Do the bulbs multiply at the base as well?
They do, yeah. So if you wanted to like multiply them, you could get one stalk out of there and plant it, and in a year you'd have 30 of them to multiply. And
what's the taste like for those? Are they? I guess you use them for chives. Are they similar to or green onions? Are they similar to that?
Yeah, they're like a green onion for sure. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I love onions, but I can't tell you how they compare to different varieties. All onions taste the same to me. which is blasphemy when you find an onion connoisseur chef.
Hey, William, what's that company that sells or gives away the 5-gallon buckets of the seed to use as a cover crop?
Yeah, so that's a green cover. Oh, we just had a webinar with them earlier today. The man's name is Keith Burns, but it's Green Cover Seed. Is that the name of the company? I think it is. Green Cover Seed. Let's go with that. They're located in Nebraska. They actually have different places around. So yeah, they will give you a 50-pound bag of seed, a one-time thing. Once you use it, you're supposed to buy it again, but they will give you seed one time. It's like a couple $100 worth of seed probably. But here's how their program works. It's super awesome. You have to fill out an application on their website, and then it's called the Milpa Garden, MILPA. It's the Milpa Garden program, and you fill out their application, and then if it looks like you can actually grow the seed, they will send it to you. They're pretty nice about that. But they want you to grow like a whole acre. It's enough seed to plant an acre or two, depending on how you space it. But then they want you to give away most of it to help feed people. So a church group, hungry people, homeless people, they don't, if you're running a farm and you want to, you're going to get their seed for free and then sell it all at the farmer's market. That's not why they're giving away the seed. They're trying to give away the seed to help human suffering. So
Okay.
it's just a generous thing. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that does sound awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so thanks, Trisha. She put the green cover in here. I appreciate that.
Betty has a question.
Hi, William.
Hello.
I put my garden in late this year, and I've always saved the beans when the beans get dry. I just keep the seeds and we use them for soup. So I purposely sowed 2 rows of shelling beans, and they are drying. They're getting yellow, and I think they'll dry with time. This, however, is aroma eating bean. I mean, we can it. It's a flat bean and we really like it, but they were still green before the frost. Will they dry and be usable in my soup? You know, will the bean inside the green, dry?
Yes. Have you already picked them all?
They're
Like-
all picked.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they all look like what you're
green.
holding up.
Yeah, we picked
Okay.
them. I've taken their beads off.
They're this green.
Yeah. So when you pop those open, are the beans are they already feeling pretty hard? Like, you know how a dry bean, it's hard when you bite it, or are they still super tender and soft?
I could put a fingernail in there.
They're
Yeah.
a little,
So they're pretty soft.
yeah.
Yeah,
They're not
kind of in
squishy by it.
between.
They're not squishy by it anyway.
Yeah. You're right at that stage where I mean, yeah, you can eat them at any stage. The thing is, when they're in that high moisture stage, they're going to shrivel down a lot. Okay. So if you wanted to save some for seed to plant again, they may not quite be viable to get really great germination. If you want to just dry them up and eat them and put them in your soups, yeah, that's going to be just fine. It would probably be better, if the frost hadn't have come so quick and you could have left them out there, obviously, because they would have been larger. You would have had more volume. So yeah, I mean, if you want to eat them, it'll be great. Once I would go ahead and just don't shell them out quite yet. Just put them, like, spread them out on a table I mean, I don't know how many you have, but
A lot.
Yeah. Well, if you have a place in a garage where you can set up a couple of sawhorses with some plywood or something to make some tables or whatever, so that you can dry them, I would dry them in the pod, because here's what's going to happen. Beans will take that green part of that pod, and they will, and even in the stem. So I'd keep them hooked to the stems. I see you had them. Some of them are hooked onto a stem.
This is what I did, but we're gonna take them off of the stem.
Well, if you leave them, if you can kind of leave as much plant material on there as possible, that plant will still transfer all of that moisture that's in there into the seed, because it's going to try to make that seed so that it will grow next year. So as much plant material and those pods, it will go into the bean. So I would just put them out on tables, spread them out so they don't rot. Because if they're shoved in 5-gallon buckets, they're going to start molding and decomposing. So just lay them out where they can have airflow so they won't mold. And then there's a possibility that when you shell those out here in 5-6 weeks, once they've dried, that those beans are big and full and beautiful, just like they had been outside for the right amount of time. I've seen that happen to green beans before. I don't know about those flat Romas. Those are a good variety, though. I like those ones.
They sure taste good right now.
Yeah, yeah.
He's gonna eat 'em.
They may not last. He might eat them all.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I have another question.
Yeah, sure.
So for the how you mix those seeds together to kind of add those nutrients and all that stuff you do for companion planting, do you still want to be careful? Because like I've heard how if you put peas and onions together, that kind of stunts the peas. Do you still have to be a little bit strategic instead of just whatever you want to grow? Because it kind of goes against everything I've learned, like as far as this likes that, that doesn't like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. You really have to get used to this new stuff I'm preaching. It's true. A lot of it does go against what we've normally known. So remember this. If you want to grow specific things in your garden for a specific reason, go ahead and do it the old-fashioned way. So if you need 50 tomato plants to can enough quarts of tomatoes to get you through the year, because that's what you like to do, go ahead and do it that way. Yeah, and your squashes, if you 25 banana squashes or whatever it is you want, make sure that you are focused on planting those plants so you have what you want. The reason of doing this mixing it up, the reason you do that is to build soil. That's why you're doing it. You're not doing that to get vegetables. But it's really fun to do that, because then you do get a lot of things you can eat. So if, let's say you have a garden that's 50 feet wide and 100 feet long, cut that in half. Okay, and then half of it, you're going to do it this way where you're mixing up all the seeds, and then grow all your other stuff the normal way. And then you're just growing this wild jungle for 5 years, this new way. And when food is produced, go harvest it and enjoy it. But don't till that soil anymore. Just grow so many plants that it's just a jungle. At the end of the year, mow it down flat, leave everything you mow on there. Go ahead and add a little bit of manure. You can put compost on every year. You can add leaves when they fall off the tree. So you're adding lots of organic matter. But the reason for growing this cover crop that is all edible is so that you weren't completely not getting a harvest. Let me say it in the positive way. That way you are getting a harvest of things you're eating. And this is the exciting thing that gardeners could be doing, because your other option is you grow a whole bunch of cereal rye and hairy vetch and daikon radishes and sunflowers and like annual clovers and 20 other things. There's nothing in there that's really edible. I mean, all of that stuff you could eat, but nobody's gonna, because it's not normal food. So you could do that for 5 years, and when you're done, you'll have a great soil. But guess what? If you plant a mix of vegetables, then you're going to be able to eat fun things from it every year. And in 5 years, you'll have a great soil.
Do you still worry about spacing, or do you just kind of throw them
No.
on the ground?
We just plant them thick.
So like I usually have like a 3-foot area for a squash plant. So you just throw it and it might have a tomato plant right next to a squash plant and one crowds out the other, but it's still just all about the soil and whatever you get kind of.
Yeah. So
Okay.
like we have a lot of people who have a tractor and a planter. You know, obviously that's not a home gardening situation, but a lot of people that I work with have big equipment, and they'll just go in and they'll plant a big garden like this that's an acre big. And so they just drive around it with their machine for 20 minutes or whatever, and they're just planting stuff everywhere, and it comes up like a jungle, and there's going to be 10,000 plants out there that get completely crowded out. And guess what? That's okay, because they got crowded out and they died, and they're feeding the soil microbes. Because the number one reason of doing this is to feed that soil. But the
Okay.
things that grow big and giant and take over, those are the things that will produce you some food. And so you have no idea what you're going to get. And even from year to year, it changes what you'll actually harvest, even with the same seed mix. So yeah, don't plant this and expect tons of food from it. However big your garden is, divide your garden in half and say, for the next 3 or 4 years, I'm building soil on that half of the garden. And this is one way to do it.
Could you, so I have on my 0.19 acre residence, I have two 12x4 garden boxes and then a 4x4 for strawberries. So if I wanted to build soil on my teeny tiny area, so could I just be strategic about it and just make sure that I have a large mix of different kinds of plants, and that will kind of do the same thing? Or
Yeah,
does it
for
really
sure.
need to? So like I could just make sure I have, what did you say, like 4 of each different type of plant?
Yeah, in
Is
your
that-
growing bed, focus
Mhm.
on 4 plant families. Now, let me explain what a family is. That's not a variety. It's not a genus. It's not the species. It's the plant family. So I don't know if you ever took a plant science class or a botany class, but you've got your you're gonna have varieties like tomatoes. There's hundreds of varieties of tomatoes, and then the species of tomato is tomato. And then the
Mhm.
genus of tomato, so it's a genealogy. You're going up the hierarchy. And so you have to go way back to plants that are very unrelated. So you got to get all the way back to plant family. And so that
Okay.
chart that I showed earlier helps you understand
Right.
different plant families.
Yeah, I took a picture of that. So,
Nice. Good.
so like if I planted like say just, and even if I was just, so if I still did like this spacing, I like to have 2 feet between my tomato plants. I did that, and like maybe let's see, some lettuces and carrots and onions. Did I cover all those families? Did I get
4
4?
tomatoes, onions. What was the other one?
Well, carrots would be in onions at their roots, right?
No. Carrots and onions are a different family.
That's right. Okay.
They're
And
both
then,
root. I mean, yeah, they're both. In fact, onions aren't even a root crop. I mean, technically they're not.
oh,
I mean, because that onion's growing down there, but that's not the root. An onion, the onion that you eat, that's a modified stem. That's just the bulb. You know how when you have an onion and you cut off the little end that has the roots coming out, that's where your roots start.
oh,
So
wow.
even though it can be buried in the ground, it's not really. It's not a very good descriptor to call it a root crop. So it's very unrelated to a carrot for sure. So yeah,
Wow.
you said tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, and onions.
Yeah.
That's 4 plant families. So here's
So-
what you want to focus on. Go ahead, space your tomatoes the normal way you would space them.
Mhm.
So if you're planting them in cages, maybe 3 feet apart, that would be a normal way to do it. Is that how you do it?
I have them climb a trellis. I do the square foot gardening, so every other square
Yeah.
foot, I'll do a
Perfect.
tomato, and I've got a huge, just I did the square foot gardening trellis thing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I know
so I
exactly
do,
what that is. Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
and then I have in that I also have peppers and onions and some lettuces, calendula.
Yeah, nice. Calendula is completely unrelated to all those others, so perfect.
Okay.
So your
So
peppers and tomatoes are in the same plant family.
okay.
Okay, it's still okay to have them in the same box. I would just put the peppers in the other side.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So that works out so that you have other plant roots that are completely unrelated that are closer to your tomatoes and peppers.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
All right, this is so helpful. Thank you.
bet.
I think that'll be so helpful for people who have small garden areas and
Yeah.
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 Thank
Trisha,
you.
get my book. Jump on Amazon, find my book because it explains all this stuff. So it's super. So here's how I wrote my book. I wrote my book so that any home gardener could understand it. You don't have to be a botanist or a horticulturist or an agronomist or a scientist or a plant pathologist to understand this. Okay. I took all of that really hairy, scary scientific stuff and then I wrote it to the common person who wants to grow some good food.
Mhm. So you included kind of what we just talked about, kind of, or
most of it, yeah.
kind of, yeah. Okay.
It does. It may not. There's a lot. It's only 200 pages. It's not 1,000-page book, so I couldn't get everything in it. So I don't think there's a chart in there on the 4 plant families and stuff, but the basics are in there for sure. And I'm on here every Thursday night, so you can just jump on here. So get connected with my website. Did you get a picture of my website on that first picture?
I got this off of Facebook. I figured I could figure out a way to find your website.
Anyway, it's georgicrevolution.com.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So you can get all my info there. You may even want to take a class or whatever, but I'm here as a resource to help you and all your friends and people.
Okay.
I want people to grow good food. And it's been hard to grow good food over the years because we have been gardening in ways that kill the soil. And so it makes it harder to garden because every time we till the garden, it destroys 50% of our beneficial fungus. But wait, how do you garden without tilling? Because we've been tilling forever. Right. And so anyway, that's what I explained in my book, and I try to make it helpful for people. So I'm glad you were able to get on tonight.
How do you get, is there a certain plant to get the fungus into? Because I've learned more and more about how important that I'm taking Dr. Elaine's
nice. Yeah.
Course.
Yeah,
and
I graduated from her class. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So I'm learning just how important it is to have fungi to keep all those nutrients and everything in it. And I'm like, okay, well, where's this fungi coming from? Do I need to inoculate it, or is it natural as you build biodiversity through different plants and stuff?
Yeah. So there's 2 things that feed the microbes, and when I say microbes, I'm including fungus. But so it feeds all the microbes. Okay. So, but there's 2 sources of food. It's the exudates that come out of the living roots of living plants. That's one food source. Okay. The other food source is the dead, decaying plant material. So when plants die and begin to decompose, that's the second food source. And that's it. Those are your 2 food sources.
So you don't have to buy a special fungi to inoculate it or anything. You just
So I'll finish. It's more complicated than that. I'm going to answer it right now. So sunlight will hit the living plant. Sunlight is the power, like the energy that drives the photosynthesis to make sugars. The sugars go down into the roots, sometimes like 60-70%. Different scientists publish different things, but it's a large percentage of that sugar goes into the ground to feed the microbes, and that's going to feed fungus and it's going to feed bacteria. But you got to remember there's thousands and thousands, there's tens and thousands of species, maybe millions, because we're learning new species all the time. But anyway, we know that there's tens of thousands of species of bacteria and fungus. And I'm only talking about the good ones right now, the ones we want, the beneficial ones. So there's all these good ones, and they are fed by those sugars from the roots and from those, and then the decaying stuff. So fungus will eat some of the sugars, but most fungus eats the dead, decaying, woody material. So old wood, woody dead things, wood chips, plants that are old. So at the end of wheat growing season, farmers' wheat stubble will be decomposed by fungus. But if I go into a wheat field and the wheat's been growing for 6 weeks, and so you have all this beautiful little grass out there that's 8 inches tall, if I mow that down, it's going to be decomposed by bacteria. So the green living plants are decomposed and eaten by bacteria. The old dead plants are eaten and decomposed by fungus.
Oh,
So the two sources are living plant roots that feed these guys and the dead plants. But depending on the age of the dying plant, it's eaten by either bacteria or fungus. So I just reiterated what I already said. But there's
because the woody,
one more part of this. The fungus will show up. Well, let me say it this way. The fungus and bacteria will both show up over time if you put the foods on the soil surface. So if the foods are there, they will show up. But if you introduce the fungus or bacteria, then they obviously show up quicker. So in Dr. Elaine's class, you're going to learn about making compost, and she makes a fantastic compost. And there's different ways to make compost, and I teach people how to do it from a bunch of different ways. But she focuses on one way, and it's excellent the way she teaches it. And she will tell you to put 60% wood chip material in, and that is to feed the fungus, okay? And then you're going to have the rest of it be a bacterial food. So it will be green living plants. And so 60% of the mix feeds fungus, 50% of the mix will feed bacteria. I said that wrong. 60% and 30%. I can count, but I just said it wrong. Okay, now when you get the compost finished, the reason for making the compost is that's where you get the fungus from. So if you order fungus on the internet from somebody else and it comes from Alaska, it's probably going to go dormant down here where we are. I mean, you're in Utah, I'm in Nevada, Ezekiel's in Utah, Helena's in Utah. I forgot where Lindsay's from, but we're not in Alaska. We're in a different climate. So we want to make composts in our own area so that it will collect the microbes from our area and multiply them. So we start out with a spore of fungus, and it grows into millions of particles of fungus. And then when we take that compost and put it on the ground, that's what we're doing, is we are introducing that to our garden. So from a very small compost pile, like a cubic yard of compost, we can inoculate hundreds of acres of land. By making a compost extract or a compost tea, we can multiply those microbes, and then we spread it out on there. I'm going to quit talking.
oh, it's interesting because when I've always heard of compost, I've always heard about the beneficial bacteria, nothing about the fungi, but it sounds like that might even be even more of the nutrient or soil health source than the bacteria. Is that?
Yeah. The
right?
fact is, a lot of people say that, because we talk about how great bacteria is, and then people say, oh, I need bacteria. And then we do a class on fungus, and people say, oh, we need fungus. And then we do a class on nematodes, and people say, oh, we need nematodes. The fact is, we have got to have a balance of all the beneficial groups for the soil to function. If we have fantastic fungus and we have no microarthropods, our soil's not functioning. So there's 8 groups that we need, okay? And most of them are microscopic, but some of them aren't. We need bacteria, fungus, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, incatrioids, macroarthropods, and earthworms. We have to have those groups. Now, if we're in the Arctic, we may we're going to need different groups than if we're in the tropics or the subtropics, or like where we live in most of the United States is in a temperate zone where we have winter and summer. So we need different ratios and different species. That's why it's important to make a local compost. And that's why Elaine Ingham is teaching her class. It's why I teach my classes, is because people need to know this stuff. But it can be very complicated and very overwhelming when you hear people like me and Dr. Elaine talk. That's why I do a free Q&A every Thursday night.
Well, it's so helpful. Yeah, just everything that you've said, just really simplified, and I can ask you, well, mine is such a small area and you explained it great. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Breaking it down.
All right, we have time for one more question, and then we're going to close shop tonight, but we will be back next week, same time, same link, same Zoom link. You got anything for us, Ezekiel?
If you were going to incorporate garlic with corn, what else would you add?
Let me think about that, man. Garlic and corn. So you're going to be planting your garlic in the fall, because that's when you plant garlic. So right now, like September, October is a perfect time. And then in the springtime, it's going to be coming up. And then you're going to plant your corn once the soil warms. So you're in southern Utah. So that's going to be like May.
End of May-ish.
Yeah, May. Yeah, because you're at a higher elevation than Salt Lake area, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So end of May, early June is when you're going to plant your corn. So your garlic will be pretty tall. So you're wanting to do 4 plant families, right? Is that what your question is?
That's the goal.
So corn. So I would, once your corn gets about 3 inches tall, you could plant green beans. So that's going to give you a legume. You would not want to do peas because you have hot summers and peas aren't going to do good. And you're going to want to plant your corn. Here's the deal. You're going to be harvesting that garlic in July where you live. So when you go in to dig up your garlic, you may need a tool, like a shovel, to dig it. So make sure that your garlic is planted at least a foot away from where your corn is, so that you don't disturb your roots very bad of your other things that are growing. So I would plant your corn and your beans in the same row, and then stagger that garlic so that it's in a row by itself. So you need one more plant family. Let a few weeds grow. That'll help you. That'll give you another plant family.
What about some wheat?
Wheat would be all right.
Winter wheat.
That sounds pretty weird. Why don't you do that and let us all know how that works out next year?
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get volunteers of it is all, because I grew winter wheat in this patch the last 2 years to turn my straw into soil. And now it's all black soil, so I'm excited to grow actual vegetables in it and fruit.
If it's too thick, it might be causing a weed problem for you. You may have to hoe some of it out. I would say no. I mean, if it comes up and you want to deal with it, that's fine. It might be harder to handle, though. But why don't you just go with something like lettuce? lettuce, spinach, and chard. Plant it the same time you plant the green beans. Lettuce and chard are still kind of cool weather crops, but they're growing low. Your corn's going to outgrow it and shade it a little bit. So the shadiness of the corn might, your lettuce and spinach might do okay. If it gets really hot, it's going to knock your spinach and it's not going to grow. But some leafy greens might be a good one. Go ahead, Trisha.
What about, I just barely learned about New Zealand spinach. Would that be a good one? I haven't grown it though.
Yeah. That would work because it does work good in hot weather. It can get a little unruly and get kind of tall, but if you're planting it strategically, so you know exactly where it is, then it's easier to manage. Yeah, that New Zealand spinach. I think they also call it Malabar spinach, and it's not related. It's in a whole different plant family than what we commonly grow as spinach, but it grows in the hot weather. I grew it one year. I did not like it. I didn't find it appealing to eat. And that was just my personal preference. That's just my bad attitude. Don't let that stop you from growing new things, because we all have different tastes, right? But yeah, for sure. That would be a fun one to do for summertime. Okay, good. This has been a fun discussion. I will get this published onto YouTube. Probably it'll go live probably tomorrow. Same time, same place next week. And enjoy having a fantastic garden.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good night.